How are you doing? What is the story? So, a short little solo episode for you guys. As I alluded to on my story, I'm going to be talking about the off-season today. I am going to be talking about mistakes that are made commonly in the off-season, or the mistakes that I see being made already in the off-season. Now, I have already recorded an off-season S&C podcast for GAA players last year. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that now. And I'm going to do my best not to go over the exact same things, although a year on and it's still similar mistakes that I am seeing. But I'm going to go into a little bit more depth in regard to some of those mistakes. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I've been seeing, what I've been doing, and how I see all of these problem areas being solved. So the reason I was thinking about this is obviously because we are in the off season and I'm working with a number of different athletes on their off season training. The ones that are typically successful, or the ones that I see making the most gains already in the off season, are the ones that didn't really waste too much time in getting stuck into their off season training. And I think there is great merit in taking a break for a week or two, minimum 10 days, I would say, generally, for a mental reset and a physical reset, so that you come back hungry and rejuvenated and ready to rock and roll and ready to put in the effort to become a better athlete. However, I see a lot of athletes leave that break too long before they look to come back. And a lot of athletes look to get back into their off-season training or back preparing for GAA in a very unstructured manner. So I don't actually think that the number one thing that athletes need to do is get a plan or a structure and define a plan or a structure. But I think it is incredibly important. But before you even do that, I think what a lot of athletes miss out on, and what they don't structure themselves and don't commit to doing, is they don't actually do any sort of a needs analysis or a review or assessment of the previous year and what worked well and what didn't work well. There's no real self-reflection. There's no going to coaches for feedback and asking them, look, why was I not in your plans this year? Or how can I be more in your plans next year? Or even if you were in their plans and you were in the starting 15, asking your coaches, how can I get better? I think you can do physical testing and you can look at your physical metrics that you have and see what aspect of your athleticism you need to improve upon. But I think there's also great value in just asking people, and then asking yourself too, what was the limiting factor for me in the last year? What prevented me from being the best athlete that I possibly could be? For a lot of athletes, it is in fact injury. Like, there's very few athletes go through the whole year injury-free with no niggles, no acute injuries or chronic issues. And now that your training volume, your team training volume has been reduced, obviously, you have the opportunity to address those issues in regards to how you're moving, or in regards to tissue tolerance, or in regards to strength, or in regards to power, or in regards to just about anything that's leading to persistent and recurring issues and injuries. And I think it is often missed that athletes don't actually reflect on what held them back from being the best athlete that they could be. So I think that's number one. You need to go and do that. Once you've done that, and you've done that with a coach, then obviously comes the plan and the structure. And obviously, a lot of athletes, this is mistake number two, go and try to write this plan and this approach to their training and their structure themselves. And I think there is merit in doing that if you're able to do it. But I think you're missing the accountability aspect, which isn't, number one, like, I'm not just going selling coaching here straight away off the bat, just coming in hot. I think that athletes, when they write the program themselves, a lot of the time they overestimate what they're capable of doing. Like, athletes on consultation calls with me all the time, like, I'll ask them, what do you think is feasible to get done in a week? And they'd be like, oh, well, I'll train every day. I'll do 6 days a week. And it's not about like what quantity of training you can do. It's about the quality of the quantity of training that you do. So there's no point in doing 6 half-hour stays and having that programmed yourself and then not hitting it regularly, and also showing up to those sessions and not going in with the required intent to actually stress the system to adapt. If you're going to develop your maximal outputs, you need intent in every session. And that means that you need to rest appropriately as well and recover appropriately as well. So I think, look, there's definitely merit in having a plan and structure, and it's better to have one than not have one, and it's better to write one yourself than not have anything written for you. But I think a lot of athletes do miss out on even just checking in with a coach, be it if there is an S&C coach in your club or with your county, just linking in with them and seeing what they think you should include in that program, because they're coming in with an external voice and an external perspective, and there's huge value in that. Like I say it all the time, like if I'm sprinting or even looking at myself sprint or change direction, it's very hard for me to see what needs to be improved because I can't remove myself from myself. Ego gets involved and I go in with my own ideas of what I think I need to improve. Like oftentimes, well, actually, whenever I went over to Alan Murdoch in Bath and we actually did a bit of training, he always picked up things so much more quickly than I would have picked them up because he's just seeing it straight away and saying it as it is. Whereas I know my full injury history, I know how my body feels, and I can't remove myself from that. So that always impacts into what you're thinking. And you know what your strengths are. You think you know what your strengths are as an athlete. Whereas when there's no repercussions and the coach can just go in and say it as it is, like they don't really care. They're just saying what they're seeing. And there's great value in doing that. And that is something that I see missed out on as well. Maybe I'll cascade into the next missing part is it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. And this is something that I have been reflecting on over the past fortnight, I'd say, with athletes that I've just spoken about that are in their off-season training. And I'm always asking them to send me video of them doing exercises, because over the last year I've spoken about the value of in-person coaching versus online coaching, and online coaching certainly works, but I think it only works if you can gain that insight into not just what the athlete's doing, but how they're doing it. I have had encounters with athletes where I've coached them for over 20 weeks and for whatever reason, they've never got around to sending video. Maybe they haven't seen the value in it. Maybe they haven't prioritized it. Maybe they're a little bit embarrassed to put a camera down on a tripod and record themselves and send it through, which is fine. However, then when I've gone to coach those athletes in person, I ask them to show me a certain drill or how they've been doing something. And then I say, Jesus Christ, have you been doing that like that for the last 20 weeks? Because what's important in terms of the biomechanics of human movement and how we move is we need to move efficiently as well as effectively. And oftentimes we will learn a certain motor pattern or a way of moving that we've figured out through the years, maybe as a result of pain and injury, maybe as a result of it just being the easiest thing for us and never being coached on it in regards to our physical strengths and in regards to our body type. There's multiple factors that play a part in how you move, but that might not be the best way for you to move if you want to move more effectively, which translates into if you want to be faster. And it might be a reason, and a lot of the time it is a reason, that you're not moving efficiently, and then we run into both chronic and acute injuries down the line, or in the immediate present as well. So I think it is very important to actually reflect on how you're doing things. And even if you don't have a coach, taking video and assessing it yourself. I think you're better off doing that and assessing it yourself than not assessing it at all. But I've seen in a lot of my athletes that when they send me more video and get more feedback, for certain ones, they tend to get a lot better. And as well as that, what I was speaking about in regards to the athletes that have got straight to it and straight into their training, they're starting to realize their potential now, and they're starting to see actual immediate results in terms of changes to how they're moving and how they're feeling and how effective they are in that movement. They're getting faster, they're getting better at changing direction, they're getting better conditioned, etc. So I think when you're training someone throughout the season, And I've spoke about it with David Gray when I went down for this season's podcast down in Waterford with him. The negative transfer of training is massive. And I explained it to an athlete earlier in regards to, she was asking me how has everything changed so quickly all of a sudden when for ages it felt like nothing was changing. She's a dual athlete, so she was playing camogie and football. And the way I termed it was, look, when you were in season, 50% of or more of your training was team training sessions. And in those team training sessions, you can't really be worried about how you are moving. You're just trying to get the ball and get it over the bar, get it in the back of the net, or dispossess an opponent. You can't be that reflective all the time when you're moving. Your body will move to the path of least resistance. So you were repping those movement patterns again and again and again and again. That's not anyone's fault. That's just the nature of the beast. That's what it is. However, when the team training sessions have finished and the games have finished, and now you have been given the opportunity to train on your own and focus on refining your movement technique, there is no real aspect of your training that is impacting on that in terms of fatigue, in terms of repping movement patterns that may be somewhat inefficient or maladaptive. So now every rep, or almost every rep that you execute, has been to a high level of quality. And as a result of repping that time and time again, the body has adapted to move in that way. So that's why over the last couple of weeks, when there's been no team training sessions or anything else impacting, no other training stimulus or stimuli, you have seen some more immediate results, because that's the way the human body works. If you stop marathon running and start powerlifting, then you're probably not going to be great or better at marathon running, and you're going to be better at squatting, deadlifting, and benching. If you stop lifting and just start sprinting, you're probably going to get better at sprinting and not really as good in terms of your movement patterns of lifting, because all of these movements, whether it's lifting a barbell, whether it's cleaning a barbell, whether it's swinging one up over your head, whether it's tackling an opponent, whether it's changing direction and cutting a sidestep, whether it's knocking a ball over a bar, whether it's sprinting linearly, whether it's running with decent technique at a tempo running pace, so 70% of your max speed. These, we can't ignore the fact that they're all skills. And in order to get better at a skill, you have to do it. We all know that. But for some reason, we think that strength is strength and speed is speed, and it doesn't matter how you do it. It's just about doing it, and it gets better by itself without even assessing or thinking about how you're doing things. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that is how we learn. I don't think that is how we get better. And we don't use that approach to, well, hopefully not anymore in terms of the team sport coaching. We don't just say, go out and kick 50 balls, and it doesn't matter if you kick them all wide, you're going to get better. No, you have to actually go out and focus on purposeful practice. Your practice has to have some outcome, reward or failure. It has to be thought about. You have to be zoned in, and you have to bring intent to it. So I think that is true for absolutely everything that you do. And I think you have limited opportunities to do that because of focusing on so many things throughout the length of the actual in-season. So now is the time to change what you need to change as an athlete to get better in regards to your strengths and in regards to ironing out your weaknesses. And what I see a lot as well, another mistake of athletes is, and it's through no fault of their own, humans enjoy doing things that they are rewarded for. So athletes often go back to working on their strengths because they're more inclined to work on their strengths because they enjoy working on their strengths because they're better at them. So in the off season, even though it's probably the time that you need to start ironing out your weaknesses more than refining your strengths, athletes go back to doing the things that they enjoy most. So the athlete that is already really strong will continue to go to the gym and lift heavy things. The athlete that is already really cardiovascularly fit or aerobically fit will head out and start running the roads. The athlete that just loves football and doesn't want to touch a weight or look at a weight or do any sort of running will be the one that grabs the bag of balls every week or every couple of weeks and goes up and starts practicing their frees or doing whatever they do for their favorite position. Unfortunately, if it's what you're good at, you're probably towards the end of maxing out in terms of that physical quality or that skill quality. So you will get more out of doing less and putting a little bit less into your weaknesses. Whereas in order to get better at the thing that you're already really, really good at, you're going to have to put more into that to get better, if that makes sense. So we need to do a little bit more, I would say, or at least do something in relation to our weaknesses in the off season. And that comes down to analyzing what are your weaknesses, what type of athlete are you? And in regards to moving on to what athletes miss in the off season is pitch work, full stop. For some reason, there's this perspective in the GAA that's not in other sports that, oh, well, the season's over now, we better not take a football out or take the hurling, well, not so much in hurling actually, but leave the footballs inside until February. And like, I don't get it, because the reason you enjoy the sport is because you enjoy playing the sport. So why the hell would you just stop playing the sport in the off season? Like, you have to get to the field and do some sort of skill work if you're going to continue to retain that physical quality and retain that skill quality. Like, we all know that if you put the golf clubs away for the winter, when you come back at the start of the spring, you don't have the same touch, you don't have the same control over the ball as you did at the end of the year. And the same thing goes for hurling. If you've ever played hurling, if you put the hurl away for a prolonged period or months and you bring it back out, your touch isn't what it used to be. It isn't what it was when you were getting more touches in and you were actually going out pucking and whatnot. So I think that is missed in relation to doing any sort of skill work and grabbing a buddy and going up and even kicking a few balls. And there's an aspect of that that's physical too, because kicking a ball is a skill and it requires loading of certain tissues. And if you detrain the skill of kicking a ball, then those tissues are going to detrain in relation to their tolerance to kicking. It's the same thing in relation to when you go back to team training sessions and you start doing small-sided games for the first time, and all of a sudden you're cutting, decelerating, changing direction, and then the next day everybody's messaging each other or chatting, they're like, oh my God, my groins are in a absolute bad place. Like I'm in ribbons here. I'm really, really sore. Like, your body has detrained in relation to its adaptation and its tolerance for cutting and changing direction. And as a result, the DOMs are far, far worse after you've put it back into that environment where it's going to have to tolerate that stimulus. Jesus, I made hard work on putting that one together. But look, hopefully you get me anyway. So I think you need to get up and kick balls. You need to get up and puck balls. And you should want to as well, because you love playing the sport. And maybe if you don't love playing the sport anymore, then it's time to take a break from the sport and maybe try something else. And I know I've spoke about in the past, I think the odd time for athletes, if you're one that struggles to do structured training by yourself, the best thing you could do is probably take up another sport or play another sport or give a go of some other sport. Although I think that oftentimes we'll go into sports that are more similar to the sport that we play because we're better at them. Whereas sometimes if you're going to improve and come back as a better athlete next year, you need to try something that you're not so good at. So if it's your aerobic conditioning that let you down this year, maybe you need to go and take up a sport that's going to put high stress on your aerobic system and will cause you to get better in that regard. If it was in relation to your ability in contact, maybe a few months of playing rugby would be beneficial to you. If it was in relation to change of direction ability, agility, and communication, then maybe soccer would be something you'd benefit from. If it's just your running quality that's impacting negatively on you all the time, then maybe go give athletics a bash. And you don't need to be incredibly competitive. All you need to do is show up and get a little bit better and focus on getting better and enjoy it as well, because you should be enjoying your training. Like, if you identify as an athlete, there's very few athletes that actually don't enjoy the aspects of being an athlete, like the training, the gameplay, all of that stuff. And maybe if it's got to a stage that you're not enjoying it, then maybe it's not for you. So then, in relation to tissue tolerance and tolerance for all of these movement qualities, obviously, speed and change of direction ability are two things that I have a heavy involvement in and maybe a bias towards. However, during the season, a lot of athletes reach out to me and they say, oh, I know I really need to get faster and I really need to improve my ability to beat players or change direction or track players, but I just don't have the time in season because, like, I'm playing college and I'm playing county and I'm playing club and, like, I'm doing extras and I don't think I have time to do any more extras, so I don't feel like I can get better at those. Like, I don't think I can do enough. Well, now is the time you can get better at them, and I still see a lot of athletes just pack it in and not go up to the field or even go to a track or even give it a bash to try and get better in that regard. And I think it's a mistake, because it'll come around to the middle of the season and again, you'll be looking at someone's arse cheeks as they're out in front of you going for the ball, and people are saying, Jesus, you'd be great, like, you'd be in the team if you could just get that sharpness and get off the mark a little bit quicker. And you'll be saying, oh, off season comes around, then I'll do it. So I think now's the time to do it if you're going to do it. And we know that any fast twitch movements like that, any sprinting, any sharp decelerations, change of direction, they're like qualities that you need to be working on consistently. If we look at training residuals, they're going to be the first things that drop off. Like, in 7 to 10 days, if you're not exposed to max velocity running, it's likely to decrease in terms of both the effectiveness that you can hit, or the times and the velocities that you can hit, as well as your tolerance to those velocities. So I think you do need to be sprinting at least once every couple of weeks in the off season. I know it's a bias of mine, but I think, like, the game is sprinting, the game is changing direction, the game is running. So I think detraining your ability to run, to be it run fast, be it run longer distances, be it run efficiently, I think is a mistake that a lot of athletes make. And I think more so than linear speed, because athletes find it easier to bleed in their work in regards to their linear speed in the season than they do to change of direction. Like, the change of direction, if that is something that you feel you need to improve upon, if it's game speed, then now is the time to do it. You have any number of weeks to do it. And if you haven't worked on it before and you feel like it's something that you really need to improve upon, then you're going to get great immediate gains from just focusing on it for a few weeks and being consistent and showing up and training with intent and measuring how you're getting on and actually assessing, okay, am I getting better? So I think that's the time to do it. And then same with athletes that say, oh, I just feel like I was a little bit behind in terms of conditioning. Well, now you have ample time for conditioning. During the season, because of the way the GAA season is structured, because of the demand in terms of match demands, and lots of teams play like 6 to 8 games in a month sometimes, you have limited opportunities to improve your aerobic and anaerobic conditioning, because you're trying to reduce the risk of any chronic niggles or injuries, and you're trying to maximize your freshness for the games. And in order to maximize your freshness for the games, you need to minimize fatigue. So you're trying to get your conditioning in at certain times in the week or in the month or in the year, but at other times it's not really appropriate to continue chasing that rabbit and trying to get better in that regard. So now you've no demands in terms of match demands. You have no commitments in terms of getting to team training sessions or fulfilling those requirements. So why not try to improve week on week in terms of your ability to cover ground around the field? And covering ground around the field is a skill as well. If you do it consistently, you will get better at it. And that's something that my athletes have told me is, it's not rocket science. Like, when you are doing the tempo conditioning and you extend the distance you're running over, or the total volume that you cover week by week, or you increase the intensity by increasing the density and reducing the rest periods, or covering more distance with slightly less rest period, you start getting better week by week by week. You start getting more able to cover ground, and it becomes a lot easier. Like, there's stages at the start of the year, you might be doing 8 extensive tempos, rolling clock of 60 seconds, which means you run every 60 seconds. For 100 meters up the field, you'll be there in 20 seconds, 25, and then you rest for the rest of it, and then you come back. And then in the season, after progressing week by week by week, and you might change the rolling clock to 30 seconds, and the distance might be 80 meters, which is only 20 meters less. You're covering that faster. You're getting there in 14 seconds, and then you're having your 16 seconds rest, and you're doing 12 of them back to back. And you're doing 3 sets of it and not a bother on you. And that's progressive overload. That's how it works. But you've worked on the skill of running at that intensity, and that's why you've got better. You've progressed it rationally, and you've showed up, and you were consistent in your training. So I think arsing around and not being consistent in your training is a huge mistake in the off season. So have a goal, have a target that you're going to hit by a certain timeline, and make some time bound and realistic goals, and make a plan to get there, or make a plan to get there with a coach. Then to move to gym work. In regards to what you're doing in the gym and what you need to work on in the gym, it likely is going to be paired with what you need to work on in the field, or on the field, because the gym is what prepares us for the field. Like, that's what we're doing, physical preparation generally. Sometimes we're trying to improve or increase our maximal outputs to become more powerful on the field, to become stronger on the field, to add a little bit of muscle mass. But oftentimes we're trying to increase robustness and improve our tolerance for playing football, or playing hurling, or playing camogie. The goal of training is to do more training so you can tolerate more training and tolerate more match play, so you can get better. A bit of a weird paradox, but that's it. Like, and it's about doing the least amount of training in order to achieve that goal, which is a topic for another day. But in regards to the gym work, you need to identify whether you are an athlete that is missing a little bit of strength, missing a little bit of power, missing maybe some robustness or some reactivity, missing a little bit of muscle mass, maybe carrying a little bit of excess body fat. Maybe you're at a weight that is impacting negatively on your ability to tolerate the demands of the game, or for the demands of the game for a given duration. Maybe you're just not able to compete physically because you don't have enough mass on your body frame. So then you're not able to create enough momentum to actually be strong in the carry or strong in the contact. So maybe that's something you need to improve upon, but you need to identify what type of athlete you are. And typically, as I've gone through, I will put my athletes into buckets, and they may be athlete that is missing a little bit of strength. They might be highly reactive, but they need to get stronger. They might be an athlete that's already quite strong, but maybe not reactive enough. And they're typically the athletes that will present with more tendinopathy type injuries, whereas the ones that are reactive but not very strong, typically they will come with more acute muscle strains. Or you might be an athlete that just hasn't had enough exposure to any sort of training in the gym. So you need to put on a little bit of mass. You need to just rep movement patterns and get stronger in those movement patterns so that you move a little bit more efficiently on the field, and you'll get some gains from doing that. That's typically going to be one of the younger athletes, though, that are maybe transitioning up from minor or up from 21s into a senior group. And that has changed over the years, given that there is a lot more youth athletic development going on now, and athletes are coming into play senior at ladies, at men's, with a little bit more experience in the gym. But still, they probably have a little bit of catching up to do for a year or two before they get to the same level of their peers in that senior panel who've been doing it for 8 years. They have a higher training age than the younger athletes. And then likewise, sometimes the ones that need to work on reactivity are the older ones in the group. And I don't think maybe it's because they're older, but maybe it's because all that's been done for the last 15 years in GAA S&C for the most part is, oh, you can lift that? Okay, lift something heavier. Okay, we'll chase strength, we'll chase power. We're not going to worry about plyometrics. We're not going to worry about your reactivity, your tolerance, how you're moving at all. Just keep putting weight on the bar, keep getting stronger and keep getting bigger. That's kind of changed in the last couple of years as the game has changed to a more transition focused game where you actually need to be able to cover ground, and you might be even a little bit lighter and a little bit leaner. But I think those athletes that are in that older age bracket, they've only been trained in one way for many, many years. So that's what they've been exposed to. So as a result of that, maybe they have become more proficient at that and are able to tolerate that style of training, the strength stimulus, better. But it's probably not what they need. And I got great results in the last couple of years in terms of athletes' ability to tolerate the demands of the season by training those different groups differently. So the athletes that needed more reactivity, okay, just do the compound lifts, do 2 or 3 sets and retain that physical quality, because realistically you're strong enough already. And if those 2 or 3 sets are of high quality, you might even get stronger anyway. And then I'm going to give you all this plyometric work and all this isometric work to improve the health and the ability of your tendons to tolerate load and your ability to be more efficient on the field. And I've had athletes that haven't missed games because they've done that. Now, sorry, I don't know if it's because they've done that, but it's probably a factor in why they have not missed games, because in previous years when they've done things very, very differently and just lifted really heavy and played all of the games and weren't managed appropriately, they haven't lasted the whole length of the season. So that's anecdotal, I suppose. It has come from their mouth other than mine, even though I'm relaying that information to you guys. But I think there is merit in bucketing athletes and not giving a one-size-fits-all approach to everybody in the team or every athlete you're dealing with, because they need different things. Like in regards to the speed work and what I've been working on with athletes, like some athletes are more ground-based, some athletes are more air-based. So I need to train the ground-based athlete to be more air-based, and I need to train the air-based athlete to be more ground-based. That's how they get better. Likewise, some athletes are under rotators, some are over rotators. I need to train the under rotator to be more on the ground and maybe get closer to a more optimal body angle where they're actually projecting themselves forward. And I need to change the over rotator, or attempt to help the over rotator to get their hips up a little bit quicker and get a little bit taller so they can be more reactive off the ground. In regards to what you're doing in the gym then as well, it likely would be effective to pair the stimulus that you're getting in the gym with the quality you're trying to work on in regards to on the field. So if you're working on anaerobic training stimulus like speed, change of direction, and you're not that worried about conditioning, it's not the emphasis, then maybe that would be paired well with chasing power and strength in the gym. If you are more focused on improving your aerobic endurance and your ability to tolerate intensities more relevant to your aerobic system, like your tempo running intensity, that might be paired really, really well with some hypertrophy stimulus in the gym. And then it's the off season as well. So another one that always crops up come preseason is athletes start cramming to try and prepare for the exam in relation to their body composition goals, because for the Christmas period and the festive period and for the off season, they don't worry about what they're putting into their body, and they don't really worry about what sort of training they're doing. And as a result, they probably don't attain the goals in relation to their body composition that they believe are necessary for them to improve their performance come January, February, March and the preseason. So then in preseason, they start eating in an aggressive deficit, which is not really optimal for an increased training demand, which is going to happen in preseason. And then unfortunately, sometimes they may succumb to injury. but they're also just going to be miserable, and the habits that they build aren't going to be sustainable. So it's probably the time now to try to build some sustainable habits, and focus on whether you're in a deficit or a surplus, or making a sustainable change and trying to either you're trying to put on muscle mass, or alter your body composition in terms of reducing body fat. Doing it over a longer time horizon is always a good idea, because you'll be more likely to achieve change and achieve positive change, because if something does go wrong, then you still have time on your side. You don't need to cram. So now is a time, if you think that body recomposition is something that would benefit you, then it's a time to do so now. And you can do that rationally if you start now as well, if you start in October, November. Whereas if you start going into December, you're going to be like, oh, well, I'm not really going to eat in a deficit for Christmas week or the week after that, and then New Year's, and I'll be eating and picking at celebrations and whatnot, so it's going to be harder. Well, start now so that you have time on your side when you get into that festive period. So maybe you can eat in a small surplus or at maintenance calories for those few weeks, and then still when you come back for January, before you go back, get back into your minor deficit or your surplus, and still achieve your goals in terms of body recomposition. So that is something that you need to identify. But I think in regards to that as well, you need to talk to your coaches, and you need to talk to a nutritionist, and you need to actually assess whether that's going to be or going to achieve positive change in terms of your ability on the field. Because oftentimes athletes will believe that, okay, if I get leaner, I'll be better around the field, I'll be a better athlete, but it might not always be the case. Like, depending on the style of game that you play, and depending on what role the coaches want you to play, it might not necessarily be in your best interest to come back with 2 or 3% less body fat, and after losing 3 to 4 or 5 kgs next season. Like, and they want you to play full forward as a target man or a target woman. But I suppose we all want to look and feel sexy from time to time, and athletes equate some aspects we talked about with John O'Connor of athleticism in terms of how you're looking aesthetically with better performance, and it's not always the case. Like, Ronaldinho didn't exactly look like, I know I always use the Ronaldinho example, but Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, all of these players, like, they didn't actually look a certain way to be effective on the field. Now, we can't say that if they didn't alter their body composition and still retain their skill level and their physical qualities, they couldn't have been better. But sometimes the orange isn't worth the squeeze, and sometimes you're better off focusing on actually improving maximal outputs and actually chasing performance improvements in relation to all of the things that I spoke about already, than solely focusing on body recomposition. But the number one thing and mistake from athletes in regards to just about in season, pre-season, off-season, everything that we see, and I talked about with John, is overconsumption of protein and underconsumption of carbohydrates. If you are going to get the most out of your training, you need to eat carbs. You need to fuel that training, because I spoke about at the start of the episode, your training needs to be with high intent and it needs to be high intensity. And in order for it to be high intensity, you need to have glycogen available for you to push intensity. And oftentimes our diets have changed so much, and the focus, because we want to feel and look sexy and everything we're fed is high protein, high protein, high protein, we end up overeating in regards to protein. And John said it a couple of weeks ago, like, sometimes it's just excess, and sometimes we're wasting calories on protein that would be better spent in relation to eating more carbohydrates. And we have our webinar with Kate McDade of NutriKate tomorrow, and I know that she's going to be banging the carbohydrate drum again, and she's dead right, and John's dead right, and it can't be done enough, but it needs to be gotten through to the athletes. Like, dropping carbohydrates, if you're an athlete, is not always a fantastic idea. Most of the time it's not. So it is a factor that, or it is true that if you want to focus on coming back with a different body composition in relation to more functional muscle mass or in relation to a lower body fat next year, then you probably do need to focus on your nutrition as well as your other habits as well that we spoke about with John, like your sleep and your recovery and your training. However, it's not going to get better by itself, but often you would be best to reach out to a professional like a nutritionist, a performance nutritionist, to have at least a chat or at least do a little bit of research in regards to what's going on in the literature at the moment for GAA players and what's being presented by the leaders in the industry and in the field, like the likes of John and like the likes of Kate, before you go making like blasé decisions based on what influencers are telling you to do. So that's where I'm going to jump out in regards to nutrition, because that's why I outsource for that kind of stuff to Kate, because she can do a better job at it than me. Now, sure, I will offer macronutrient and basic nutrition and recovery and rest and all of those habits coaching for my athletes. But I think that when it goes into the micro and it goes into the more finer detail habits and the things that are going to achieve real change, I think you're better to look to a nutritionist for that regard. And that's why we get Kate involved, and she does a great job of it. So I think I've covered a lot of things there. I know there's probably some crossover with the previous off-season episode. I haven't gone as far into detail in terms of the S&C aspect, because that was a conscious thing, because the last one I went into heavy detail in that regard. But mainly it just comes down to decide what you want next year. Do you want to come back a better athlete than this year? And what is going to lead to you not doing that? Identify what is going to hold you back. Identify what you need to improve upon, and then go and chase it. And be willing to go out and seek guidance in regards to how to do that, because we're professionals and it's our job for a reason, and it's our job to help, and we enjoy helping. So ask people questions, figure things out, and then just achieve a plan, be consistent and stick to it. And then there's no reason that you won't come back a better athlete come January, February, March. So yeah, commit to action and then act and do it. So at the end of that episode, I might as well say that I have 5 spots available now for online coaching in the PD Performance Premium Pack for November, which is great. I said on last week's podcast I had 10 available. I didn't by the time that went out. I actually only had 7, but we've had a couple of more people sign up. So now I've only 5. So if you have listened to this and you're like, look, I want to commit to action, and Pete sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and he's right in regards to a lot of this stuff, and I think he could help me, then reach out to me with the word premium, and we can jump on a conversation. We can do an audit of what you're doing at the moment. We can see if I can help. And if you're a right fit for the PD Performance Premium Pack, then you can grab one of those spaces before they're gone. As well as that, if you've been struggling with persistent injuries and return to play is something that you've never done, you're just doing the usual stuff in the gym and you're not getting any return. Every time you come back, you're experiencing the same problems, then reach out to me as well and we can have a conversation in that regard too. And even if I'm not the right person for the job, I'll pass you on to somebody that will be the right person for the job for you. I have a good network now. I'm glad that I've built a good network, and there's some really, really good people in the industry, and I think we can all eat. And I think our goal has to be improving the standard of S&C in the GAA sphere, but as well as that in the world, and helping people. So if you're somebody that needs help, make sure to reach out. So I think that's as good a place to leave it as ever, but I might as well say that today, the GAA Gamespeed Blueprint is going live as well, which is a 16-week program of speed and change of direction and a progression through my perspective and my system for developing game speed for GAA. So if you're a coach or athlete that would be interested in that, I am doing the starting 15 discount. So the first 15 people that purchase that program are going to get 15% off. So you can access that over on my website. If you have any questions about that, shoot me a message as well. But yeah, I'm really excited for everything we've been putting together, and I'm really excited for the future. I have 2 fantastic podcast recordings coming this week as well, and then I have Australia and the Australia tour on the horizon as well. And I've been working with some fantastic athletes and making some really valuable connections and really valuable change as well. So things are going good, and hopefully they're go good for you guys too. And hopefully they will go good for you guys next season, as long as you commit to action. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please remember to like it, share it, and send it.